There's a particular part of every church that I love. And it's a part that goes unnoticed, which is this right here. This step. In every church, I love this step. The reason why I love this step is something that happened to me a few years ago. So I was in Hibbing for 2 years and then moved to Brainerd. When I got to Brainerd, I would distribute communion off the step on the ground here. And after about 2 masses, I had the sacristan pull me aside and say, "Father, we don't distribute communion down there, we distribute communion on the step." And I thought to myself, who are you to tell me how to distribute communion? I know what I'm doing, and I have the freedom to choose whether or not I want to be in the ground or the step. And in my mind, I'm thinking, also, all these reasons why I would be on the ground. Because I'm taller than a fair majority of the parishioners, and bending over for a long period of time does a number on the lower back, and so I don't need the extra height. It makes it worse. So I'm thinking all these things. I don't tell them that, but I just nod and say, "Okay, thank you," and then I continue to distribute on the ground. Until a few months later, Father Tony, my pastor at the time, says, "Father, well, here we don't distribute communion on the ground. We distribute communion on the step." And now I'm thinking to myself, why do you even care how I distribute communion? Is it really that bothersome to you that I'm distributing on the step instead of on the ground? What's the difference? And so that mass, because I knew he was watching me, he just told me I was a good associate priest and I distributed on the step. But come Monday, when he wasn't there, I thought to myself, his eye is no longer on me. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to distribute communion on the ground. And that's what I did. And then it hit me in that moment. It was like I could see myself in the mirror, and I could see the ugliness of the pride, and I thought, how ridiculous is it that I would let something as insignificant as this get in the way of my exercising of obedience? That I would let something like this prevent me from growth in humility, and at the same time, growth in profound love. How extreme my pride is that I would let just a single step get in the way of it. And I wouldn't submit myself in obedience to the pastor or the sacristan who informed me that that was the law of the parish. Because obedience is so important. It's such an important tool in the Christian life. We could ask ourselves even the question of Jesus himself models obedience to the extreme. And why would he set his life like that? Why would his life be defined by obedience? And now maybe there are several answers to that question. But I think we can see in obedience, and in him who is obedient even to the point of death, we can see what obedience does. That when we're obedient, it helps us grow in humility. And now I'm not going to give an explanation as why humility is important in the Christian life. I've preached many homilies on it. It's a foundational virtue. Without humility, the Christian life just doesn't exist as it's meant to. I'll just say this, that Pope Francis describes it as a horizon, that we should move towards the horizon of humility. So if we're on this journey towards heaven and we want to look at where we're going, then we should make sure that we're heading towards that horizon of humility. It's not a destination we're going to get to ever, but we want to be moving in that direction. And I would be so bold as to say that we're not moving in the direction of humility, if we're not pursuing that horizon but something else, then we're not going to find the relationship with God that he means for us. Because that can only happen in humility. So if we want to pursue God, we've got to make sure we're pursuing humility. So I'll just say that. And obedience is, as we all know when we do it, one of the greatest salves, one of the greatest benefits, one of the greatest tools to growing in humility. And so that's one reason why obedience is so important. The other reason is because obedience allows us to exercise a great form of love. It's a great tool to growing in love. You see, we might give many things to God. We We might sacrifice our time. Lent's coming up, so we might give alms. We might give to the church. We might offer some goods externally. Maybe our favorite thing. And we offer up that to God as a sacrifice. And those are all good, and things that we should do, and they're foundational in the Christian life, but it's only in obedience that we give God something that only obedience can give, which is almost the very essence of our being, our will. Because when we submit ourselves in obedience to something that the Lord is asking us to do, we're giving all of our choices, our direction, all of that is submitted. And so it's like we're giving the very essence of who we are to God as we submit ourselves in obedience. And now you might ask yourself, well, how do I know when to be obedient and whether or not God's asking me to be obedient in this case versus that case? And the rule of thumb is the legitimate will of your superior is God's will for you. And so legitimate will, so it has to be just. But any just ask of you, well, you can, if you disagree with it, obviously you can talk about it. You should let those who have authority over you know of your disagreement. But any just ask of you, we can see as God's will for us, and a way to exercise obedience to that authority, and so out of love for God. Now, your family is a great place for this. So families provide lots of opportunities, as we know, for obedience, and typically when we don't want to give obedience. But your job can also be that place where you exercise obedience, and you can make that little act of love out of God, even though you're just being obedient to your boss or whoever it might be. You can do it out of love for God. So that's a place to exercise obedience. There's many other opportunities, and each of us have our own people that we are bound in authority to. But I would say, especially in the church, the way it's structured provides opportunities for obedience. Here at our parishes, we have the blessing or maybe the misfortune of having had in the past few years quick turnovers of priests. And with every turnover of priests, there's this uncomfortable time of how are we going to do things? Are we going to distribute communion up here? Are we going to distribute communion up the step? Are events going to change? Is some of the ways we celebrate Mass going to change? All these things can change with the coming of a new priest. And I'm not going to be here, for who knows how long. That's not don't spread a rumor that okay? I just mean that I'm not going to be here forever. And so you're going to get a new priest. He's probably going to change things and not like the way I did it. And instead of seeing it as like this great, instead of groaning against it and being frustrated, why does Father even care the way we celebrate, the way we distribute communion? Instead of grumbling against it, and you should talk to your priest and say, hey, I like this, I don't like this. We can see those as an opportunity to exercise obedience. And it's such an important tool in the Christian life. Because it's the greatest tool to exercise the two most important virtues. And we hear these virtues in the scriptures today by the virtues of humility and love. And so find that thing in your life, that place of obedience. Seize those opportunities, even if it might be something as simple as a step.